Okay. It's always nice and easy as you start up. It's the start of the session, not halfway through. So give yourself time to settle into a comfortable posture. You want to have your feet hip width apart, so not too close together or too far apart. Toes pointing forwards. Your weight forwards a little bit. This is exaggerated. And correcting the feeling of leaning by just letting your hips drop back, soften your knees, a very slight curve in your knees. And we sometimes refer to it as sitting. So it's very much like you're sitting. And so that same sense of releasing, say, in your back or your shoulders, as you might get when you sit into a chair and just settle in to the chair. Just give time to absorb some of these details of how this feels. Partly in the interest that we're going to be making corrections as we start to move, but also to bring your attention in to your body and to focus that attention in the center part of your body between hips and waist. And starting to just turn there. Notice as you start to move what changes. Are you tilting your hips? Are you overdoing the shoulders? Can you feel the connection? Just a small movement in your hips will travel up your body into your ribs and your shoulders, and you actually move your arms through. So your arms, quite heavy as they hang down, just following the movement of the shoulders. They're swinging gently from your shoulders. So you may feel a little bit of movement in your shoulder joint, almost like somebody's taken hold of your hand and is moving your arm for you. People have been doing this for a while. As you get used to this sitting posture, your body conditions, the muscles condition, so it's a comfortable posture. Maybe even a similar kind of quality of movement in your hip joint. So your body's obviously supported by your legs. Your upper body is sort of sitting into your hips, sitting into the ground, and the feeling of your center of gravity dropping. Maybe think of your pelvis as though it were like a bucket hanging from a rope in a well, dropping down. So you feel the pull down into the ground, and you allow that to happen, and fairly quickly you'll meet your body's response, which is like you're being pushed up. It's like, again, sitting into a sprung chair. You drop down and then you find a kind of level, or maybe in water, you drop down into the water and then you feel the water pushing you up a little bit. So less strain on your shoulders and your back and spine. And then just start to be aware that the whole of your back supports the front of your body, your belly, the solar plexus, your chest and ribs, the weight of your head. So the muscles, particularly at the front of your body and in the sides and back, lose some of their stiff tightness, some of their kind of hardness. They're still functioning, of course, but you're not pulling your belly in or holding your chest tight. So a sense of movement all the way through your upper body, around the internal organs, and maybe also, again, as you get more used to the posture, in the muscles of your back as well. And finally, supported from within, think of the big bones of your skeleton, the bones of your feet and legs, pelvis itself, spine, collarbone, ribs. They're all things that hold the shape of our body. So we don't need to hold a particular shape a particular posture. Think of a mannequin in a shop window displaying a shirt or some kind of coat or some kind of garment. The garment itself is very loose, quite soft, presumably, but the shape is given from within. So we just start to become aware that there is these very natural structures and processes, really, that support us. And as we become more familiar with that, we're more confident in them. And that means that gradually we begin to trust them more. We're more likely to come into them. So this is the sort of posture that creates an environment within our body for movement, whether that be the movement of the muscles, blood, and oxygen, and so on and so forth, and digestion. So many processes that we have require movement. Or we could be thinking in terms of the flow through the whole body and the sense of connection. When you turn in your hips, your arms move, for instance. You may even notice a bit of movement in your weight. Ideally not with this exercise, but it doesn't really matter if you're feeling that a bit at this point. So as well as being a valuable warm-up in aerobic terms, your heart will start to beat a little bit faster, body temperature will rise. So just like any physical activity, we do a warm-up. It's also a good opportunity to review our posture, to see what's working in our posture, what isn't working, where we might want to very gently bring about some kind of correction. And in particular, this feeling of being rooted, where the stability comes from. Now, changing what we're doing with the arms, so creating a shape with our arms, but not one that causes them to stiffen up. So bring your hands into this sort of position. Just have your hands as high as you're comfortable with, but no higher than your shoulders. Let your elbows drop, and you're still trying to keep those big muscles of your arms fairly soft. They're obviously functioning. It's quite clear, but it's not just the big muscles like biceps and triceps that are maintained in the position of your arms, but tendon, ligament, postural muscle, bones themselves, and so on, the fascia, all contributing to the structure. And then drop your hands down. Now, put one foot forwards. Keep the width of the step. You can see the background between my legs. Don't stand like this, because then it starts to naturally get a bit wobbly. Moving your weight forwards and backwards, and your feet are at different angles, so that encourages the turning. So we have with this exercise all the kind of key factors. We're told in Tai Chi, first in the mind. So quieting your attention in the first instance, and then using that quiet and attention to notice what's going on within your body. And then with that goes a sense of intention. We intentionally move in Tai Chi. And then the movement is rooted in the feet, with this feeling of your center of gravity dropping. Transmitted through your legs. So as you sink down, as we've already noted, we get a sense of a push up. Instead of it pushing us up and down, which it does in some exercises, but in this one, just straight forwards and backwards. And then directed or shaped, controlled by the center of your body. When you turn in one direction, your body moves in that direction, obviously, and expressed in the arms. Your arms follow what's happening in your weight and in the center of your body. And these are the primary foundations of everything that we do in one form or another. Some of the exercises we will be doing, the first set of exercises, will be an appreciable transfer in the weight, but the legs will still be functioning. So it's not just about weight change and so on and so forth. So again, good exercise to practice, just to remind ourselves of the qualities of the posture that we want to try and develop. Try on the other side. And again, just aware of how this posture, when we start to get the elements of it in place, allows for movement. So we don't want to strain against our body. We don't want to, for instance, when we turn, feel a tightening in our back or shoulders. When our arms move, we don't want to stiffen up in our shoulders and arms. We want to maintain that sense of spaciousness, a sense of softness, as it's sometimes described. No one word is adequate to describe it. And then shake out. So the technical side gives rise to a feel. Now, if you see this water bottle, it's quite squidgy. I can push in, and yet there's still a resistance. And this is sort of how you want the soft tissue of the body to feel, that you could push your finger in and then it would just spring out again. Or if you think about a balloon or something like that. And all of these gradually become habitual to us, and gradually we get more familiar with them, and with that awareness, that intention, we start to appreciate those qualities in our daily lives. Now come back to the parallel stance. So 70% of your weight in the front half of your feet. Again, exaggerated. And then this sense of just sitting back. Try not to stiffen up in your lower back. It's quite difficult to do that, but as your weight drops, there's less and less need for that straining in the lower part of your back. Your legs will feel it, particularly your thigh muscles, but be careful not to let your knees stiffen up. Now, just let your hips drop back a little bit more. Gravity will do this way. You don't have to push them down. So sinking down and pushing up. One image that we often use in Tai Chi is that we're moving in water. It doesn't entirely cover the whole story with this one, because in water, the buoyancy of the water would be holding you up more. Imagine you're in water and somebody just gently pushes on your head and you go down, and then they take their hand away and you bob up again. In fact, what's bringing you back into this rooted posture, what's making you go deeper, is through gravity through your body, and in particular on your hips and lower back. So the whole time, to a greater or lesser degree, lower back, hips, and buttocks, and the feeling of overhanging. We don't want to come back to this. You can see my knees have stiffened up and I'm already being projected forwards. The pelvis will adjust as it goes down and up. And if you place a hand in the small of your back, in the curve of the small of your back, as you sink down, it gets a little bit shallower, and then it becomes deeper as you push up. We're not looking for our spine to completely straighten. We may get more shallow curves, and that helps the alignment of our spine, its ability to transmit movement, but not completely straight. Bring your hands around, and your hands are now going to follow the movement. You push up, your body expands, and your elbows get pushed out, and that brings your hands up, and then sinking down. Imagine trying to lift a ball by pushing up through your hips, and then again, as though you're in water, pressing the ball down. Looking for that feeling of releasing tightness in knees, hips, lower back in particular, so that this gradually encourages a deeper sense of that rooting down, that dropping of your center of gravity. The exercise is called rooting down because of that. When you come up, there's a bit of pressure in the soles of your feet. So it's like a plant or a tree. Well, a tree is a plant. It's like a plant growing out of its seed, out of its roots. Doesn't pick its roots up and carry them somewhere else. Roots stay down in the ground, and the stem or the trunk extends. So your body extends and then contracts. Breathing comes naturally, maybe following that pattern of expansion and contraction, but not forcing that. So if your body's trying to breathe differently, just let your body breathe differently. Otherwise, it will become a dreadful strain. This time, at the bottom of the movement, turn your hands out. And your hands go out to your sides. This is a movement called the wild goose. So if the image of the bird in flight brings a quality into your movement, good. But if it doesn't really resonate, don't worry about it. We use a variety of images, and the use of imagery is one of the ways that we find this connection, this overlap between mind and body. Become the quality of the images that work for us become part of our intention. And we can think of intention as being our minds in one form or another. There's our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, just a whole spectrum of qualities that we could classify as mind. As though it were given instructions to your body. Move like this, do this, or whatever. And again, with time, our bodies become accustomed to following those directions, to finding the best way. Our bodies often will find the best way to perform a task, shall we say. And then, still sinking down, let your hands cross, push up. Heart in the cloud, an expansive movement, but not a stretch. Notice my arms are still bent here. I don't want to lock up my shoulders or elbows or back. But just as far as you're comfortable. And just recognize that none of these movements are purely physical. Mind and body certainly overlap. They're not really the separate entities we often unconsciously think of them as. And as I just said, mind in this context covers a range of things, not just what we often think of as mind, which is our thoughts. So there's all sorts of reasons why spreading your arms out like this might feel uncomfortable. In Tai Chi, we always look for the path of least resistance. So if you meet a barrier, don't strain against it. This is not a competition to see who can move the furthest, but just sort of ease away from it. And this time, let your hands drop down to your sides, feel their weight hanging from your shoulders. And as you push up, focus on one side, pushing your arm up, like you're plucking something off a tree, something very delicate. Wrap your fingers around and pull down. Your hand finished, downward movement, fingers open, and then switch to the other side. And pull down. One of the principles of movement that we try and follow in Tai Chi is to find the path of least resistance. So going back to that idea of the barrier, whatever it's called, whatever its origins, we're not getting into a process of analysis at this point. But, you start to feel a shoulder tighten or something like that. Water, when it flows downhill, when it meets a rock or some kind of impediment, will flow around it. And in the same way, this idea of the path of least resistance encourages our body to find a way around these blocks. In the process, what may happen is that they sort of wear those blocks away gradually. It's not always going to be the case. And at other times, we may want to be a bit more analytical about it. But that's always an important first stage. This is the last one of Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. And come back and just let your hips settle. So in this position, I'm going to come a bit closer to the camera. I'm going to exaggerate slightly. Really, it's quite a small movement initially. You just drop down. You're yielding. You're allowing gravity to pull the air of your hips and buttocks down. Remember, they overhang slightly. You can feel the pull, but it's not pulling you over. You can also feel that your body's responding. There's a density. Again, remember, it's like you go down into water and it pushes you back up. So even without going up and down, we can still experience the two-way movement. Downward with the pull of gravity if we're not resisting, and again, if we're not resisting, that sense of movement upwards. So it's still there. Now bring your hands to your sides. And we're going to do the first and the last of this little set of movements. Bring your hands around in front of you. Push up with your back lengthening. Hands no higher than a few centimeters above your head and still in front of your body. And then down. And then lift again, but let your elbows drop so your hands push out to the sides. And back. A nice steady movement, expanding again. And contract. Excuse me, and then expanding, contracting. Now keep a nice steady rhythm, and notice how this movement in particular, if you're following it in your mind's eye, brings your attention back to that central part of your body. Push out, and then this time in that central part of your body, just turn a little bit from side to side and note how that changes the direction that your hands are facing in. Try and have your palms facing away from your shoulders. So now, bring your hands back, putting those four movements together, starting with the upward movements, pushing in four directions, and then down. Push out to the side, and again, feel your body expanding. You turn in one direction, and then contracting. You go back, take your time, pushing out, turning, turn back to the front, and let your hands come in. And then facing forwards and push out. And back. A nice steady rhythmic movement back to the beginning. And just see if you can start to feel little changes, patterns of movement within your body, perhaps in your back, but really wherever your attention is drawn to, so that you start to get a sense not just for the external shape of the movement, the choreography of the movement, but the sort of echoes, the resonances of those movements within our body. Again, just bringing your attention more deeply into your body and creating the potential for being able to influence those small patterns, those small changes through our intention in one way or another. So for people more experienced in these arts, there's a kind of reversal of that. Rather than our arms producing the internal movements, we begin to focus much more on the internal movement, moving our arms forwards. And this gives rise to this experience of the movement building through the body. We can think of the flow, the dynamic of the movement, the momentum. We can label it as energy if we wish. And there's any number of energetic processes that take place in our body. One that we're principally concerned with at the moment is obviously the kinetic energy that produced by the movement. And remember, the movement has its origins in this ability to yield to the pull of gravity and our body's response to that. And the more experience we get, the more that sort of integration of inner and outer is used. But we have these three key sort of poles, if you like. Tai Chi sometimes referred to as the three treasures or the three jewels. We have obviously the physical aspect of the movement, the mechanics, the postures. We have our minds, our intention, our awareness. And we have the movement itself, the flow, the energy. And these three things blend. They work together in the same way that the three legs of a tripod will work together. Not that one is more important than the other. And when they start to blend in a harmonious way, this is perhaps what we could refer to as the chi. One more round of this. So these are useful reflections in the movements that we're more familiar with. It comes with time and with practice. If you regularly do these exercises, you'll recognize the movements and that sense of familiarity and lend itself to that greater depth of awareness. Changing after this one. And this time again on one side, an expansion, pushing your arm out. This time it swings up, comes up above your head and then straight down. This is called circling palms. That's your half circle. You push your hand away and it naturally swings up, elbows quite soft. So what's happening in that side of your body as your arm extends out and drops down. And then if it's comfortable for you, when your hand gets to that position, just slightly above your head, you turn a little bit and let the hand come down. And if that's pulling on your back or your shoulder or your hip, then maybe just leave it. You know, it might not be the right time to do it. But again, what you might be able to do is just get that feeling of releasing. Maybe just notice if it's in your hip. Can you just allow your hip to sort of drop a little bit or feel as though it's dropping a little bit? And then change sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. And then if it's comfortable, return. One more time. And come back to the stand. Give your legs a shake. So just as mind, body, and energy contribute to the movement, so they all benefit from the movement. So an improved posture is obviously very important for our well-being. The greater sense of energy and flow and harmony is also very important, especially when we look at Tai Chi's, one of Tai Chi's roots being in Chinese medicine. And the attention that we bring, the intention that we bring, really helps us to generate that sense of stillness and calmness in a meditative sense. So when I talk about there being space for movement within the body, we also start to get a little bit of space in our minds, and there's many benefits to that, well documented benefits as well. There's very much a technical side to this though. So before we go on to the next couple of exercises, just to think a little bit about what's going on, I'm going to try and illustrate something with the pole. You think of this pole that's going through the middle of my body, so the center line of my body. If I move my weight forwards a little bit and then sink my weight back, notice how I come into line with that center line. That could represent the pull of gravity. Notice it's going straight down into my feet. I don't want this or this at the moment. And when I sink down, my pelvis will level off. Think of your pelvis as being like a bowl of water. This is going to change for the next couple of exercises, because for those, as we sink down, we deliberately tilt the pelvis, we push our hips back. And exactly, you don't have to do anything like this much. And you can see this has changed the angle of my upper body. This is not a back bend. This is not me just leaning forward because my center of gravity will pull me over. I show that with the pole. It's not the ideal example, but you'll see here that if I simply tilt forwards like this, it can become very precarious, and I'm inevitably going to tense up. But if I do this, then there's a kind of stability still there. It is, however, very strong on your knees and very strong on your back, so be careful you don't have to do anything like this much. And then to come back upright, I don't want to do this because now I'm straining in my back. Again, I sit back like this, and that brings my head up very slowly, and then I push up. So we're going to do that movement. If you're new to this, or your back's feeling a bit stiff, or your knees are feeling a bit stiff, then it doesn't have to be a big movement. I'll try and do it quite big so you can see what I'm doing. Use this for the next two exercises. Sink down, push up, and let that movement push your arms out a little bit, a bit like the wild goose, and then push your hips back and feel how that brings your hands over, and then they drop down and hips drop back to the original position. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Side, you can see it's a circular movement with my fingers, shoulders nice and soft. Listen to your body as you do this. Don't strain. Again, remember, this is not a competition. And people who don't do this regularly don't have the expectation that necessarily you will do it as much today as you did it yesterday. We change from day to day. It's important to keep aware of what's going on in your body, to listen and to respect what you're hearing. And then your hands drop down, but this time in front of your belly, palm down, turn horizontally, push back, and then swing around and back to the beginning. So our center can rotate horizontally, vertically, and in doing so, it has an effect on the upper part of our body. This one is called polishing the table. Don't overextend your arms, again, elbows staying nice and loose. If that idea doesn't work for you, imagine just having a big ball there and you're rolling the ball around back to the center. One more in each direction. And then stand and shake out. So the center part of your body between hips and waist becomes an increasingly important point of focus. We're literally moving in a centered way. It's the center part of our body that we want to sit on the ground. It's the center part of our body that we expand out from and go back into. It's the center part of our body that when we want to, our arms to do a particular thing, that we turn. So if I want my hand to go over that way, I would turn that way rather than just move my arm. And it's the center of the body that links all other parts of the body. Sometimes it's imaged as like the hub of a wheel, where all the spokes go into the wheel and radiate out to the rim. Sometimes referred to as the center, sometimes it's referred to as the dantian or the lower dantian, which really means sort of field of elixir, field of energy. So we gradually cultivate an ability to bring our attention and our intention into that area. And significantly, if you've got a bicycle and you spin the wheel, the hub of the wheel stays still. The wheel moves around it. So again, it becomes symbolically perhaps the kind of point of stillness that we can bring our attention back to, particularly when we get that feeling of it dropping towards and through the ground. So from this parallel stance, I'm going to illustrate this with a couple of short sticks. This is my hip width, more or less. So I'm going to have my feet on the outside of this. I'm going to take a step forward. So what I do is I turn one foot out and I step forwards to here. I don't want to step to here. If I step to here, it's like I'm trying to balance on that narrow stick, and it's all going to go wrong. So we've taken that basic parallel stance and the qualities of that stance into what is referred to as the bow stance. Get rid of these, you'll trip over them. So you imagine the lines going through your feet, turn one foot out and step forward. Front foot points straight forward. Back foot is at a comfortable angle. Again, hips dropping down, got that sense of settling downwards, and then start to transfer your weight from one foot to another. You could imagine sitting on a ball. If you think of the big blue ball, the Pilates balls that you get in gyms, imagine you're on that and you're just gently transferring your weight forwards and backwards. Try not to lean. We often do that to get ourselves moving, but remember, we're not after speed or power or momentum with this. So you can allow your hips to drop back, and your center of gravity effectively moves within a square. You think of your feet on the diagonal corners of the square. You don't want your center of gravity out here somewhere, because that's going to happen. And again, taking the long pole. Again, it's not quite accurate, but close enough. You can see as I move, this is moving. I'm not trying to do this. There's often a very strong temptation to do that. So that's very much part of everyday walking. But so should this be, because this is a more stable thing. So you could almost think of this as being the heart of walking. And as we were doing earlier with rowing the boat and polishing the table, it might be appropriate sometimes to angle forwards, but not to lean. There's a difference between that angling and leaning. When we angle, we can send our center of gravity forwards, but if I go too far, I've got the hips to bring it to bring me back. So this is an important component of walking. Give yourself a moment to let your weight settle in each foot. So there's that sense of almost sinking down a bit more. It probably won't involve your hips dropping more, but perhaps an increase in that sense of pressure in the leg, not straining in your knee or your ankle, so that you begin to feel that, again, there's that push, and this time the push pushes you forwards and then backwards. Going to about 60% of your weight in the front leg, no more than that, and up to 70 in your back leg at the moment. Then if you go into your front leg, and as you rest there, push your back knee forward. You'll get a feeling of dropping through your hip, and your back heel will come up, and more of your weight will settle in your front leg. And when you go back, again, try and let that hip drop and draw your toes up. You sit back with more weight. Do this very carefully. And you can now turn the front foot out just a little bit if that helps. Not so far that it changes the direction, but just enough to open your hip a little bit. And we're looking to get that feeling of our weight dropping down into a single foot. Remember that center line. So you're gradually bringing your body to a point where your head is above the foot, not out here somewhere. And then when you're ready, just bring the rear foot in, push back and out to go back to the hip width mark, and go back. And the front foot in. When you step forward, your heel goes down, then your toes, and then your weight. Same idea when you step back, except the ball of your foot goes down first. And just imagine that you're treading onto thin ice. And what you want to do is you plant the foot down, you say. The foot makes a good contact with the ground, a little bit of pressure downwards. Is the ice safe for you to commit your weight? Try not to do this because you'll fall through the ice. Now, change over. Imagine the parallel lines again, and transferring your weight. And then raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. Always take a moment here and here and here, just to flick your attention very briefly to your posture. Are you still sinking down? Are you still in line? And you'll find with time that becomes a very kind of intuitive, habitual thing. And again, this is something that I feel goes with us into our daily lives. But this time, step forwards again, or backwards if that's where the space is. Take your time, it's not a race. Just reflect on this process of walking for its own sake. I'm going to do one more going forwards. But then we go back. Trying to keep your attention in your body, recognizing that it will tend to flutter around, take off somewhere else. Bring your feet parallel. When that happens, and it happens to everybody as far as I can tell, certainly happens to me, just see if you can gently draw your attention back. Don't sort of get into a kind of mode of thinking is I must concentrate. It's counterproductive. And if you struggle with that particular exercise, it's a really good practice. It's a good regular practice. Effectively, you're trying to relax to become more stable. So if that's difficult for you, and it is a difficult thing to do, if you go next to a wall, I could just have my hand on very lightly on the wall here, and that may give me the chance just to find out, how I can get that sense of sinking and stability. So there's a great deal going on in that one exercise. But now, come back to having your right foot forwards, going forwards and backwards. Hold your hands over your belly. Notice that your arms are moving with you, of course. And then it's like a wave coming from your back foot, and the wave pushes out through your arms and it separates your hands, they come apart. Just open your chest and sink back. This pigeon spreads its wings. So you feel the expansion coming up through your belly, the solar plexus, chest, and then contracting, just feeling a little bit of expansion in your back. Pigeon spreads its wings. Remember that feeling of your arms being moved. And your arms being moved by this momentum, this energy that builds up in small stages from your back foot, small changes, expanding, contracting in muscles, and tissues of one kind or another. Building up into one overall move. And then change the movement as you come back, let your hands drop down to their sides. Again, aware of the weight of your arms. Going forwards, drawing your arms through back. This is called fisherman cast the net. And just notice there's a very natural curve. Your fingertips drop down, swing up again, and then you push forwards, and drop down. You don't have to lift your arms. They're being moved forwards and backwards by the transfer of your weight. And the other response is going up through your back and so on. And the very fact that they're attached to your shoulder ensures that they will swing up a little bit. Make sure you're not overextending your arms. And this time, as you come back, you turn in the direction that your back foot is facing and swing through. So now you've got the same movement going across your body, guided by this turning in that central part of your body. And this time, just let the circle continue so your hands come up, no higher than shoulder height. You go forwards and turn, and as you turn, it brings your hands down across your head. You expand in the right side of your body and back. Again, those of you more familiar with these movements, See if you can focus on that expansion in the side of your body and think of movements like dragon plucks the stars from the sky and circling palms, both of which have very similar movements. And they contribute to the overall movement of your arms, keeping your shoulders quite soft and your arms expressing, shaping the movement, the flow, the energy that is already there. So you can see these different elements are all present here. There aren't that many of them rooted in the feet, transmitted through the legs, controlled by the center of the body, expressed in the arms. The style of the movement, expanding and contracting, looking for the path of least resistance, all building together to make this slightly more complex exercise. Good. And shake out. And the other foot forwards and pigeon spreads its wings. Another thing that happens as we become more familiar with the movements and as we become better at focusing our intention is that we have an idea of the shape that we're going to be doing. When you're familiar with the movement, it's pigeon spreads its wings. I know this one. I'm familiar with the shape. I'm familiar with how it feels. And it's almost like you're creating the shape in your mind for your body to flow into. So pigeon spread its wings. Do this one more time. Change into fisherman cast a net. I sometimes have an image of rolling out a carpet or throwing a sheet over a bed. This one, I don't get to cast many nets around, so. Sometimes, when we find the right image, it can really enhance the movement. This time turning. And we can imagine the shape that we're about to make as we feel that expansion in the right side of our body. Like a figure of 8 on its side, or a rounded X shape. Some people like to think of it like the infinity sign that they use in physics and mathematics. Yeah. Nothing special about the images when they work for you. If they work for you, that's useful. But remember, we also have our memories. They too become images. The memory of expansion in, say, dragon plucks the stars from the sky can maybe help you as well. Now this time, again, you can turn the front foot out a little bit if you're going to go forwards. And then you go forwards, you can go backwards. Bring the empty foot in as you raise your hand, and then step and go into the empty leg and bring your hand down. Settle your hips. Once you've got a feeling that your hips are settled, what you may want to try and do is just bring the knee up a little bit. Again, if that doesn't feel comfortable, don't do it yet. It's dropping back as your knee comes up. Again, I'm going to change direction after this one. So I don't bring my back foot in, I go back and then raise. Take your time to settle in. This is not a race. Notice then I didn't feel comfortable raising my foot, so I didn't. One more time. And again, if you want to work on things like stability, an exercise like that can be done with the wall behind you. If you do feel that you're going to stumble, you can just rest back against the wall, and you can just do it like this. You could go from side to side. So there's plenty of ways that you can adapt these exercises. Now, standing with your feet parallel again, and rubbing your hands together, tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, and your arm go down the inside of your arm, up the outside, the other side. Try and leave the muscles nice and loose. Launch your back. It can help to just take some of the sort of tightness out of the muscles that has probably built up around your hips. Then you go down the outside of your legs, up the inside. Right on your belly and onto the upper part of your chest. Then our regular closing exercise, embrace tiger, return to the mountain, and a chance just to reflect on what brings us into this more centered, more stable, more rooted posture. What brings us back to this quality of stillness and calmness. To sink down a little bit, push up, again, a little bit like the wild goose, but then bring your arms around, holding the ball against your chest. Hands come in, elbows drop, and then pressing the ball down. So even as you push up, aware of that slight pull through your hips and your shoulders, you pull of gravity, drawing your arms in and then down. So an awareness of gravity working through our body is a really good way to sort of recover some of these qualities of the posture, qualities that we group together under the term central equilibrium. Zhongding is the Chinese term. Everything coming to rest. One more time. And thank you very much for watching and joining in, everybody. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. It's nice and sunny here in Cambridge, so I don't know what it's like where you are. But thanks a lot again for coming. Bye-bye.